Welcome to my dream koi pond project.
This is going to document a lifelong dream of mine to build a massive koi pond full of beautiful fish right here in my back garden. Since I was very young, probably about 4 or 5 years old, I have been obsessed with water and with everything that lives within it. That was what satisfied my mind, and I'm sure there's people just like me out there watching this video. Water and the fish that swim within it are fascinating. Early this year, I think on like the 5th of January or something, the project actually got started.
We'd just like to get all the equipment in, get ourselves marked out so we know where we're going to dig, and yeah, ready for day 2 where we're going to make a real mess.
Well, the guys have flattened my entire garden today and also begun to mark out the actual shape and size of the pond. Before the pond specialist team arrived, we had to clear the garden. So my dad and I basically created a blank canvas for the guys to start work on. We took apart our old ponds. Rather than letting those sleepers go to waste, those pieces of wood would be used to build the raised planters, in the newly designed garden. Now some of you will be asking, but where's the fish? I know a lot of you care quite a lot about my big carp called Charlie the Chagoy. Whilst this new pond project was completed, we needed to make the space, we needed to reuse the sleepers, so I got a friend of mine to look after Charlie during this duration. It took 2 or 3 days, I think, to get down to the depth we wanted. We wanted this pond to be 5 foot in total, so we were going 3 foot or so into the ground and then coming up by a couple of feet as well. Of course, when you dig the hole, you need to go deeper than you think because you need to lay some type 1 aggregate in the bottom. You then need to pour your concrete to set your drains within. I'll get onto that later. But yeah, we had to dig a bigger hole than we thought we needed. I think one of the things that I found incredible is that the pile of mud is massive. The guys have explained to me that the reason why that pile of mud is so big compared to the size of the hole is because when you dig it out of the ground, it expands, air gets mixed in, it breaks apart, and yeah, it looks like more once it's come out of the ground. But I think we're going to do 2 or maybe 3 lorries, like grab lorries, full of soil before we're finished excavating. Well, this is a mad situation. I've just come into my house to get a quick breather and to grab the camera. And I want to tell you that currently my drone is hovering above the house. And that is happening. I'm standing in the hole. It's still being dug out behind me, but the actual full size of this hole is nearly done. There is a small amount of water coming in at the bottom of the hole, which I guess just shows how deep this thing is. By the time that hole had been dug, I looked into the garden and just thought, what have we done? Day 3 has come to an end. You've made a massive hole in my garden.
Yeah.
With the aggregate laid in the bottom of the pond, we now had to mark out our bottom drains. Bottom drains work a lot like a plug hole in a bath. Rather than pumping water out near the surface, it makes total sense to take water to the filters from the bottom of the pond, where all of the dirt and the fish poop and the leaves and the, rubbish settles. This is a really efficient way to keep the bottom of the pond clean, but also get a great amount of flow pushing through those pipes to, feed the filtration system.
Ryan, what are you doing here?
Just to come and see your old.
Well, yeah, I didn't quite say it like that. Yeah, what do you think, Ryan?
I could swim in it.
We could all we could all swim in it.
All the is she in like the quarantine thingy?
No, she's gone to my friend's pond. I love that you come to see me and the first thing you ask, it's not like how's Omi or how's Alex.
How's Charlie?
How's my koi?
Well, this is for your koi.
Yeah. Oh, my koi is going to be very happy.
Well, I mean,
with
this is probably bigger than your old pond without it even being above the surface.
Yeah, I know, right? Ben, it's not going to leak, is it?
Of course not. Have faith.
As well as the large 4-inch diameter pressure pipe that runs underneath the pond, which is going to take the water out, just next to it is a thinner pipe. That will carry air. What it enables us to do is put an air pump in the filter house that pushes air down there, and then the air bubbles will come up through the dome on the bottom drain. Basically, the combination of bubbles going up and the water going down the drain helps keep the bottom of the pond clean, and it also oxygenates the water.
I'm looking forward to the next stage, which is what?
Next stage is pouring a load of concrete into the bottom and then building all the blocks around the outside and then fiberglass and then filter house and then
Long project.
a load of other things. It'll be months, basically. Hello,
Hello. It's loads more.
What do you think?
It's a hole
A big hole.
with pipes. Oh, amazing.
Stuff's happening though.
Yeah.
The next step was probably the most exciting one of all, pouring the concrete into the base of the pond. Everything else had taken a lot of time. It was a slow process and I had to be patient, but not with the concrete pouring. We had a huge truck full of concrete, and it lifted its sort of arm up over the fence, and the guys had created this slide for the concrete to slip down into the base of the pond.
Actually, do you mind leaving that slide there for when the pond's done? I reckon that would be quite a nice way to cool off in the
You might
summer.
have members of the public jumping over the wall as well.
Once it was down there, they then had to rake it into place and make sure that it settled as flat as possible.
Well, that was definitely the most exhilarating step of the project so far. Pouring the concrete over the wall. Never imagined they could do that.
Very exciting, wasn't it?
The concrete is now in. Ben reckons that we're on schedule, which is good. The concrete is down.
Get this levelled, tidy up, and off we go.
See you on Monday.
See you on Monday.
Over the weekend, the concrete set, and on Monday morning, the guys were back and ready to start building the blockwork.
It's Monday morning, and that means the pond builders are back for their second week. Over the weekend, I basically just caught up on everything that I should have been doing last week, but as the pond's happening and the guys are in the garden doing stuff, I'm finding it really hard to sit at my desk and do editing. I will get round to it at some point, but right now the guys are out there. They're going to start doing the block work today, I think, and basically that means we're going to start seeing the shape of the pond. This is actually reminding me a lot of that game we used to play at the arcade with the claw. Apart from obviously they're actually grabbing it each time, which is good.
These concrete blocks are actually hollow, so as you lay them down and as they build the wall, you can put steel reinforcement rods horizontally and vertically through these blocks, and then when you're done, pour concrete in to the the cavity within the blocks. What it essentially ends up with is a solid concrete wall, something that just will not break. It's something that can't possibly break. You're talking about 17 cubic meters of water being within this pond when it's done. That's just tons and tons and tons of water. And yeah, you can't cut corners. You have to make it really, really strong to ensure you don't have leaks or any problems in the future.
Someone told me that if you keep builders well fed and watered, then they do the work better. So that's what I intend to do. These guys deserve some food. The rain's coming down now, but the guys are still cracking on. Block work is... What do you reckon? Do you reckon the block work is a third done? Half done? Very nice.
You look at that bit of bubbles in the right place. Only on this corner though, don't look at it all.
Don't you agree though that you're literally the best block layer that's ever laid blocks in this garden on a pond?
In this garden?
Yeah, on a pond.
Yeah, because like, I didn't lay them bricks, so I'm alright.
Do you know who laid those bricks?
Probably your mate, wasn't it?
No, my brother.
Well, he's had a good go. Well done. Well done.
They're a little bit wobbly.
Yeah, alright, rustic.
Yeah.
A little bit noisy. I do feel a little bit for my neighbours right now because they have put up with this now for 2 weeks. With the cold weather preventing us from doing any block work, the guys decided that now was a good time to dig out the base for the filter house. We needed some foundations to build the filter house on top of, and we also needed to position some pipe work beneath it. This was one of the most exciting parts. I know it doesn't sound like it, but to me it was. We positioned drain pipes for if we spilt water on the floor of the filter house. Then also we have a waste pipe from the filter, and then also another pipe for when we purge the bottom drains. Anyway, all those pipes joined into one, and then that goes out the back of the pond and down into the soakaway. With that all complete, and with the shuttering in position, the guys were able to put concrete into the base of the filter house.
The last block.
Now, excuse me if I'm getting ahead of myself at this stage, but looking at the pond and starting to see the structure of it and the pipe work, I started to think about fish. Obviously, I already own a beautiful chagoy called Charlie. I've also got a Makashi Ogon, which is kind of like a ghost carp, which is currently living at a shop called Quenny Koi, somewhere up north. I point north because it's in the Midlands area of England. Basically anywhere above London for me is north. So I've got 2 fish already, but looking at the size of the pond, I was like, you know, I could definitely have more than 2 fish in that. Kitsu is the koi dealer that imported Charlie when my first ever Japanese koi. So I drove up there, met up with Chris, and I just walked up to the big main pond, looked at one and just went, I love it. I love that fish, that's amazing, it's beautiful, it's so tame. It was the tamest one in the whole pond. It's a karashigoi. It's like a yellowy coloured karashigoi. Karashis are one of my favourite koi varieties. They're always like one colour fish. Sometimes you get them in like mango colour, yellowy colour. Sometimes you get deep red ones as well, which are really cool. I didn't see any deep red ones, but I might try and find one of them soon. But anyway, I saw this big fish in the main pond and I was like, right, I want it. I just want it. Of course, it's completely out of my price range, and the guy, Chris, who runs the shop, didn't really didn't really want to sell it to me. It's kind of the shop pet. I had a look around the rest of the shop and I saw some medium-sized fish, I saw some really little ones, and then Chris said, oh, check out this one. He bowled it up for me and we looked at it up close. It was an incredible, I think they call the variety a kin matsuba. I think that's right. Incredible fish, and again, I was in love with it and I just really wanted it for my pond, but budget-wise, it's going to be a stretch. Anyway, I'll put the question to you guys, what would you do? You know, what in your wildest dreams, what would you stock into a pond like this? I'd love to see what you guys think. Leave a comment down below. Little colourful ones, a mixture of colours, big kahaku, massive, you know, friendly, plain sort of coloured fish. Let me know what you'd do, and we'll talk more about the stock of this pond in part 2 maybe of the koi pond build. Upon returning home from the koi shop, the pond building team were now drilling holes through the wall for a number of reasons. One of these holes is the return from the heater. Another one is just the water coming straight from the filters, so that's quite a fast flowing jet of water to keep the bottom of the pond clean and to circulate the water around it. But then they were also drilling holes through the walls because I wanted to do something a little bit different with this build. I wanted to have lights in it. Now, you don't see a lot of koi ponds with lights beneath the surface. Normally you see fish sort of lit from above. Now, what I wanted to create, and this is the dream, we'll have to see whether or not it ends up working, but I wanted to light the fish from below so that of an evening there will be sort of dark silhouettes of fish drifting around the pond with light sort of coming up out of the pond onto the garden. Whether or not that ends up working and really being as magic as I imagine it, we'll have to wait until the whole lot is done. What do you think of the front of our house, Om? Stunning. It's work in progress. More piles of mud.
Oh, the strawberries.
Oh, your plants.
A bit dusty.
A little bit dusty.
The Oaza drum filter has been delivered. Look at the size of that, it's a little bit of an upgrade from my last pond filter.
That day we had the delivery for the filter that we'd chosen for the pond. I'd gone for a ProfiClear Premium, which is kind of like a combination filter. It's split down the middle. One half is a rotating drum with a really fine mesh that takes out all of the solids. It makes the water crystal clear. And then in the other compartment is the biological media. I could talk about filtration and make a video that's 2 hours long, but this isn't the video for that. It is fascinating though, and it's such a complex and just mind-blowing process. Things were really cracking on now. We had the pond built to full height. We could really start seeing the shape of the pond and how the garden's going to look. We then started constructing the raised planting area on the left-hand side of the garden. This was made out of the sleepers that we previously had built our old pond out of. So no waste on materials. That started getting done in the next couple of days. I think tomorrow actually. My friend Steve, he's coming to start building the filter house. Well, just the other day, myself and my dad decided to paint the fence. By painting the perimeter of the garden in dark green helps it sort of sink away into the distance and has definitely made the garden feel a little bit bigger than it did before. One of the next tasks was to make the bottom of the pond slope down towards the bottom drains. This will help with dirt collecting on the bottom, finding its way down to the bottom drains and therefore over to the filter. One of the pond specialist team did most of that work as he's trained and skilled in doing such things. However, the very last section, I lent a hand leaning over the edge of the pond to finish off the last part that you couldn't do from within the pond.
Not bad. All the blood's gone to my head.
I guess that's one of the benefits of being very, very tall and having long, lanky arms. Because koi are quite messy creatures, they eat a lot and they can pollute the water around them very quickly, you need considerable filtration to keep that water fresh and clean and keep the fish healthy. Now these filters and pumps, I wanted them to be tucked away, I wanted them to be enclosed within a filter house, rather than just having them laying around and pipes going everywhere. It would be horrible to look at, you know? So I spoke to a friend of mine, Steve. Steve used to be the bailiff on a fishing lake that I used to fish with my brother many years ago. So he's a good friend that we've had for a long while now. And he now runs a construction company called Busy Bees Construction. I would say that one of his specialities is woodwork and joinery. So he was the perfect person to build this wooden structure which would hold all of my electrics, pumps, filters, and also I'll be able to keep, you know, some koi food and my nets and bowls and things within that filter house too.
Has anybody ever said you look a bit like that actor?
Shrek?
No.
I was impressed to see that Steve and his colleague Bernie managed to put that filter house together in less than 3 days, and for a good price as well. An important element of this filter house is that I wanted it to be breathable. Of course, there's going to be lots of water flowing through it, there's going to be warm water flowing through it due to the heaters, and I didn't want it to get, you know, full of condensation and damp inside. A couple of days later, my dad came round to once again help me with some painting. We painted the filter house a dark green colour, just like the fence, to help it blend into the garden and to take your eye sort of away from that construction. Yeah, a dark green colour will definitely help it sort of blend in to the surroundings. I think we had quite a lot of rain at this point because we hadn't yet waterproofed the pond, we hadn't put fiberglass in to seal it. And because we hadn't done that yet, water was basically coming up from the water table, seeping into the pond and essentially flooding the base of the pond.
The guys are going to dig a deep hole just outside the pond, deeper than the pond itself, and then vacuum the water out of that hole to hopefully reduce the sort of water level around the outside of the pond. Well, I'm hoping it works. Certainly going to cause a lot of problems if we can't get all this water out.
And thankfully, by pumping the water out of this sort of sump next to the pond, every couple of hours or so, eventually we managed to dry it all out. After all that heavy rain and the flooding of the pond, the next thing that came along was a load of wind. We had one of the biggest storms that this country has seen for years, like definitely the strongest winds that I've ever experienced within my lifetime. It was the sort of conditions, the sort of weather that you really wouldn't want to be on a plane. And it just so happened that on an aeroplane coming in from Japan, landing in London that day, was a couple of fish that I had purchased, and they had been shipped, or rather planed, into the country that morning. It just so happened that this was Chris's biggest shipment of koi I think that he's ever done. He had so many new fish arriving. I helped where I could with these boxes of koi. Didn't really know what I was doing, but it was definitely exciting to lend a hand. I got to handle and look at more fish than I've probably ever handled and looked at before.
You got any fish coming, Chip?
2.
Have we seen them yet?
Yes.
Oh.
I showed them to you, 2 sankey. They obviously made such an impression over all the single yellow fish that we've been looking at.
Yeah, I was just staring at the bright yellow ones.
Yes.
So for someone who just adores fish of all types, it was a really, really exciting day. And I also got to see the 2 fish that I had ordered. One of them was a red karashigoi, sort of a more orangey colour, but I think it might become more red, you know, in time. And I also got a soragoi.
soragoi are sort of a bluey, silvery colour, and I know some of you are probably thinking like, your choices of fish are a bit strange, but I like to go for the fish that are all one colour. They tend to grow bigger, they grow quicker, and from my experience, these single coloured fish tend to be more tame. Like they're more willing to feed from your hand, and they don't sort of get scared of you so much. And my aim with this pond is to create something very relaxing, very minimal and calming. And for me, one colour fish do exactly that. So as well as those 2 fish that I got to see during the shipment, I also finally made my mind up about the 2 big fish in the main pond. As my soragoi and my red karashi are a little bit smaller, I decided, given the massive size of this pond, I wanted to have at least one really, really big one. And thankfully, Chris at Kitsu did me a great deal on 2 fish. The first one is the kin matsuba, which is like vibrant orange colour with a pine cone reticulation, like a pattern down its back. This is like, I don't know how you describe it, like a netting almost. Really, really cool creature. And yeah, I love that one. So I bought it. That's going to be one of the 5 fish going into this pond. And I also plucked up the courage to go ahead and buy the big karashi goi, the big yellow karashi. It's about 83 centimetres. That is going to be an amazing collection of fish to sit alongside Charlie, my chagoi, and the little makashi that I got from Kweni Koi last year. So at some point, you guys on this channel are going to see me introduce all those fish to the dream koi pond, but there's still work to be done before fish can be introduced. Welcome to my filter house. This is where all of the water for the pond will be purified, oxygenated, heated, before it is then returned back to the pond. In here we have installed a drum filter, a moving bed biological filter. Then there's a standing bed filter, which also is colonised by beneficial bacteria. And then at the end, just here, we have an individual module. This is what the pumps and the UV lights sit within. The water comes out the back of this module, runs along the wall and up through a heater. There's another pump inside this individual module. That second pump will go up over here through a phosphate removing sort of cartridge and then return back to the pond down the other side. The aim with the water that returns back to the pond is to sort of jet it into the pond to create a circular movement of water around the pond. The last thing you want is large dead spots where the water isn't being circulated, dirt is accumulating on the bottom of the pond. So the way we position the returns means that the water will be pushed around in a big circle, making sure that that water is always being filtered and cleaned and also heated. Then up on the other side, I've had a team of electricians come in to sort that out. They have fitted all like the switches and the plugs and the sockets, and they've wired everything up to connect it to the heater. That's nearly done. They're like halfway through doing that at the moment. The guys then fitted the cladding around the pond. It's not quite finished. We still need to do the sort of finishing touches around the corners and the bits that will end up going around the window, but you can get the idea of how that's going to look. And then there was fiberglassing. Now this was what we needed to dry the pond out completely before we were able to do. The fiberglass needs a dry surface to adhere to. It doesn't set properly if it gets wet. So the fiberglassing team arrived in the morning. The forecast looked perfect, seemed like it was going to be dry all day. They started work mixing up this sort of resin-like liquid. The resin is applied to the walls along with these strips of fiberglass. It's basically like loads of little thin strips of glass weaved together into a fabric, which when it's mixed with the resin then sets super hard and solid in place, and it's also waterproof. So it's basically the perfect thing to line a pond with. With a pond liner you get folds and creases, but with fiberglass there's none of that. It's a really nice finish. Watching the guys do the fiberglassing was quite mesmerising, seeing them mixing up all of the liquids in buckets, painting it onto the walls with rollers. And once the whole lot had sort of set and they'd had their lunch break, waiting, patiently for it to all cure in place, then they had the final finishing touch, which was the gel coat. This is the black finish, which makes it all look smooth and gets you your colour. As they were painting this on, out of nowhere, the heavens erupted and it started raining. Now this was bad news. Thankfully, the sides of the pond, they all set fine. That didn't really get affected by the damp. However, the bottom, that didn't really cure in time, and the water meant that it didn't set properly. So I anticipate those guys are gonna have to come back to strip the base coat out, sand it down, and then reapply it, hopefully in some better weather. It meant that it just didn't set quite properly and it stayed quite tacky. It wasn't ideal. So the guys kindly came back and redid it. With the fiberglassing finally out of the way, it was time to fit the glass window to the pond. This was going to provide an amazing alternative angle to observe the fish from a side-on view rather than just from above. And once that was done, it was time to start filling up the pond. The way things were going, it looked like it wouldn't be long before I could stock my fish. Now, at this point, I had 6 fish. 5 that were being kept at koi dealers, fish that I'd purchased but obviously hadn't brought home yet. And then finally there was Charlie. Charlie is a chagoi that I bought out in Japan, and that fish was being looked after at my friend Jack's house whilst this whole pond project was being completed. I decided to call in and visit Jack because I hadn't seen him or Charlie for a little while and I wanted to see how my fish was doing. But also, on that visit, he also mentioned that he had a fish at a dealer down the road, which he was going to collect. It was set to be, I think, the biggest fish in his pond, a really nice kahaku. So together, we headed off to Koi Water Barn in Kent to go and collect his new fish. The Koi Water Barn is a really impressive shop. Not only do they have a lot of water and a lot of fish on site, but they've also got 2 ponds with massive windows, giving a crazy perspective. I've certainly, other than at like public aquariums, which have got sharks and stuff in, but I've certainly not seen setups like that really anywhere else. We introduced Jack's new fish to the pond, and I said goodbye to Charlie, believing at the time that I'd be bringing her home in a week or 2. Back at my pond, we were finishing off the coping and the cladding. Now the cladding is what goes around the pond on the side, and the coping is what you use to circle it on top. Now I've seen a lot of ponds that use sandstone, a brick or stone-like material, and sometimes slate. Slate coping stones around the top of the pond certainly make it very modern, quite professional look. However, I really wanted to go for something quite subtle. I like the idea of gentle on the eye, not too distracting, as essentially I wanted the focus of this pond to be the fish. I wanted to look out at the garden and my eyes just be led straight to the fish. We went for a nice cedar wood around the outside, and then on top I think it's Douglas fir, because using cedar around the top would have cost, I don't know, it would have cost a lot, probably too much. We found 1 or 2 leaks, but the guys were able to fix those with a little bit of silicone and tightening up some Jubilee clips and stuff. We now needed to fit an electrical supply from the house to the filter room. Now, I probably should have done this when we were putting the water supply in, but kind of forgot about it at the time. I managed to find a guy called Lewis Clements from Thronmore Services. They were really, really helpful. I was so baffled by the different appliances and how much current they would require, how much electric was needed, watts, amps, volts. It just baffles me. And these guys were super qualified. They had all of the paperwork, which meant that they could legally sign it off. And yeah, they got a setup working, drilled a hole through the back of the kitchen to run the electric round.
That's a very big drill.
It was complicated, but the guys did it with ease. I think I was out fishing at the time, but Omi was recording a little bit of what they got up to.
Yeah. Yay!
I noticed there was a slight oily slick on the surface of the pond, so just to be on the safe side, I decided to drain that water out and wash down the fiberglass one last time before filling it up for real.
Here we go. It's happening. We are now eventually filling up the big new pond. This is quite a big day.
Now I thought that was going to be the last time I filled up the pond, but a couple of days later I realised something was seriously wrong.
Just got home from a fishing trip and we have a problem. The water level is dropping. I put a little sticker at water level before I left, and the water's gone down by an inch or two. And there's loads of water down here, all around the outside of the pond. So it's leaking quite badly from somewhere.
I dug up the pipes around the front of the pond, the ones that were supposed to be used for my lighting, and found a lot of water all around the perimeter. I sucked it all out, it came back through. I pumped it all out again and it filled up again. All the while, the water level in the pond was dropping. There was a couple of quite serious leaks. We realised there was water leaking from the light pipe, and there was also a small leak in the filter house. The pond specialist team returned to help me out with these and managed to fix the one in the filter house quite easily. However, the leak on the light pipe around the front of the pond, that one was difficult, shall we say. The guys reckon that they could fix that leak. However, the fact that it was continually dripping and we made a fix and then it started leaking again, and we tried to fix it again and then it leaked some more, I just decided that for peace of mind we were going to scrap the lighting situation. I didn't like the idea of doing it if it was going to potentially cause leaks in the pond down the line, and we ended up patching up those holes which were going to have lights in. We patched them up with fiberglass and yeah, scrap that idea. I was a little bit gutted about that change of plan, but at the end of the day I needed to sleep at night. I needed to know that my pond was not going to leak, and that was the best way to proceed. I refilled the pond for I think the third time, and no sooner had I got it to the top of the glass window at the front, the water level began dropping once more. At this stage, I'll be honest, I was getting really frustrated. I wasn't quite at the stage where I wanted to just fill the thing in and start again and just give up with the whole pond project, but it was getting on my nerves. I'd filled the pond 3 times, and once again the water was escaping somehow. I found a slight drip, just a gentle drip where the heat pump was plumbed in, but I thought it can't be that because you would barely notice the water level changing. Once the pond was empty, I found where the water was escaping. The fiberglass had actually cracked and detached from the bottom drain, and that's where water was gushing through. I needed someone to help out with this, as fiberglassing isn't an easy task, so I gave Matt from GRP Lining Services a call. He came out, had a look at it, and said yes, this is something that we can fix.
So the key element here is to stop that water from getting to the drain.
First, Matt drilled holes through the fiberglass so that we could suck the water out from beneath it, drying out the area. You mustn't do any fiberglassing whilst the surface is wet.
Now you've got to lick your fingers when you're done. It's like making a cake.
Check the sell-by date on it.
Oh, that's horrible.
See, we've got the water coming back up there now, look.
Oh yeah.
The pond's still fighting us at the moment, but we're winning the battle.
Over in the filter house, I realised that the trickle-in top-up and the overflow had been forgotten. These are big projects, and although I'd included it in the plan, some things just get forgotten about as you're running through because there's so many things to do on a pond build like this. So I got on the phone to Lee from the Pond Pro. He came out and showed me the best way to set up a trickle-in and also an overflow. I wanted an overflow to the pond just in case it rained or I put too much water in. And this 90-degree bend fitted within the skimmer allows you to sort of turn it and adjust it to set your finished water level. With that done, he also set up the water inlet where gradually, very slowly, water will trickle into the system. Rather than doing a large water change, dumping a quarter of the water and then topping it up straight from the tap and having to add the chlorinators and stuff, it seemed best to just gradually trickle clean water, fresh water, into the pond over time. Well, hey, made it look so easy.
It's easy when you know how.
We put a small tap on the end of the pipe, meaning that I can adjust just how much water is flowing into the pond at any given time. In the summer, when the fish are eating a lot and they're very messy, I can change a little bit more water, and in the winter, I can just have that basically dripping.
Thanks for the help.
Maybe see you in Japan.
Yes.
After what felt like months, well actually I think it was about 4 months, I was finally able to stand in this filter house and one by one switch on the air pumps and the water pumps and get the whole lot running.
Wow.
I watched the bubbles rise up into the pond, the Awaza filtration system kick into life, and I was one happy boy. I had dreamed of this moment for a long, long time. I did a school project, I think when I was in year 8, all about fish ponds. And if that kid in year 8 could have seen this setup, this incredible fish keeping system, I would have been mad excited. And I guess that's how I feel now. The Compact L drum filter seems to be running pretty much perfectly, haven't had any issues as of yet. The water is looking good and the pumps are thundering about 20,000 litres of water around my pond every hour. And considering they are pumping such an immense amount of water around, the filter room isn't too noisy. There's a little hum of the air pumps and stuff, but quite impressed by the actual kit, and I'm very, very happy with how the system is running. It was quite satisfying to see a couple of leaves fall on the pond and very quickly get washed down the skimmer into the filtration system. I'm sure that will come in handy when autumn comes around and there's loads of leaves falling on the surface. So yeah, that's good. And talking of leaves and plants, it was now time to do the gardening element of this project. For this, I decided to get my dad round because his job is actually a garden designer, landscaper. Me personally, when I go to the garden centre and buy a plant, I end up putting it in the wrong place, in the wrong type of soil, and then it either doesn't grow or it dies. So I thought it best that I get Dad to help out with the planting and gardening side of things. To be honest, this was one of my favourite parts of the garden overhaul or pond build. Working with Omi and my dad in the garden, planting everything up and making it look nice. Yeah, it was a really enjoyable day. Whilst we got stuck in putting plants in the ground, my friend and joinery expert Steve worked with his colleague Bernie fixing some of the joins on the woodwork around the pond, getting them looking really nice. It is all kicking off in the garden today. We've got the builders building a building, funnily enough. Omi is planting, Dad is planting, and I've just woken up because the last 4 nights I've been out fishing and not getting very much sleep. So now I'm very, very tired, but we're in the garden and today is sort of finishing off day. He also began constructing a lean-to building on the side of my house, which is where Omi is going to be able to store her pots and compost and other gardening tools.
Oh wow, this is looking good.
I'll also be able to stick some fishing gear in there, because when I get back from a fishing trip and my nets are kind of wet and smelly, it's no good having them in the house. So somewhere to hang those up and dry will also be really neat. My dad has always told me that you mustn't just dig a hole and put a plant in it, you then need to water it in.
That looks like you're vegan. Watering your garden.
You heavily water it, then I believe it gets rid of the air bubbles that are in the soil, and also it just helps the plant sort of get started and get rooted. So we watered the garden properly, took a step back, and felt pretty good. It was an incredible moment. The plants were all in, the pond was there. We just needed some fish now. Before putting any fish into the pond, I needed to make sure that my water quality was all okay, and I'd left the system for around a week or two just to settle down and for some bacteria to start colonizing. A little bit of algae was growing and things were looking good. I tested my water parameters with some testing kits. It was quite nice doing that actually in my filter house at the sort of shelf that I'd made, and yeah, it was all ready to go. Some of you may remember watching a video on this channel from earlier on in the year where I met up with a guy called Frank. I observed his beautiful koi pond, and then he took me to a dealer down the road from his called Quenny Koi. Whilst we were there, we got to see a 90 centimetre Makashi Ogon in the flesh, which was incredible. And then they surprised me by letting me go through a bowl of small Makashi Ogons and choose one for myself. The fish that I actually picked out, they said they would look after until this pond was done, and now, a few months down the line, I was able to go up and collect it. Arriving at Quenny Koi, I never expected to see the growth that this fish had done. It was amazing. It was almost like looking at a completely different fish. I remember holding it in my hand the first time and seeing it was, I don't know, 25, 30 centimetres or something, and now it was a beast at over 50 centimetres long.
That was smooth.
You like that?
Yeah. That's a guy who's done it a few times.
I was dread to think how many times I've done that.
Once I was home, floated the bag on the pond for a little bit for the temperatures to adjust, and then introduced my first koi to the dream koi pond.
Is that 50 centimetres? Maybe a tiny bit more or less. I'm not sure if you should measure to the point of the tail or to the fork of the tail. I'm not really sure about that, but she's a 50 centimetre fish roughly.
Hey, fish number one.
Of course, that one fish swimming around the pond all on its own looked kind of lonely, so the next day I collected Charlie.
She is unbelievable. What a creature.
Yeah.
Charlie is home.
It felt amazing releasing Charlie into my new pond, as I hadn't had her in the garden for the last 4 or 5 months, so it was very nice to get her back. Interestingly, once in the pond, the Makashi was so curious about Charlie, like swimming in circles around her, nudging into her. I don't know whether they're friends or whether it's coming up to spawning time.
It's good to have Charlie home.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's now a koi pond.
Around 2 months ago, I introduced the first fish to the pond. This was quite a nerve-wracking time because I was just getting used to how the system worked, understanding the water quality and the parameters, but thankfully everything went smoothly. I was so happy to see Charlie enjoying the new pond because previous to this, I'd kept her in a smaller, shallower pond with perhaps not good enough filtration, and I admit I underestimated the process and what's involved in koi keeping. And now with this proper pond, Charlie looked happy and I felt like I was doing koi keeping properly. A couple of weeks passed and I was just planning on collecting my brand new fish, the big ones, and then I noticed something wasn't quite right. I wasn't keen to introduce new fish whilst Charlie was behaving strangely, but what I noticed was that she'd sort of sink to the bottom and then really struggle to get back up to the surface. This is often a swim bladder related issue, and I learned about how carp within them have a small pocket of air. That air is what helps them sort of suspend themselves in the water and float. Charlie had obviously had some sort of swim bladder issue because she was just sinking to the bottom, and it was horrible to watch because she couldn't feed so well, and every time she did come to the surface she'd just take a big gulp of air and then sort of sink back down again. Because I wanted to get a better look, I netted Charlie and put her in a koi bowl. On closer inspection, and after sort of sedating the fish and rolling her over, I realised she was very, very fat, and inside were tens of thousands of eggs. Sometimes carp can get what's known as spawn bound. They aren't able to release the eggs themselves for whatever reason. So some gentle massaging, which was quite a surreal experience, I'll be honest, helped her release all of those eggs.
Endless eggs upon eggs.
Now, I have been told that this is quite a risky procedure, something that you probably shouldn't do, but I had a bit of experience of doing it on carp that I had bred in the past, and also goldfish, and it had worked out before. So I managed to help the fish release all the eggs, and then once back in the pond, she was good as new. I couldn't believe the difference. This was a fish that was like not even feeding anymore because it just couldn't swim around properly, and now with the eggs out of her, she was fine. Next, I inspected the water quality and found that the Awaza filtration system was doing its job perfectly. And then I thought, now's the time to go and collect all of my new fish. I'm back at Kitsu Koi. This is the dealer that sold me 4 fish earlier on in the year. I picked out some really nice specimens, and today I've had the chance to actually see these fish for the first time in months. So in this first pond is one of the fish that I bought. I'm trying to spot it at the moment, but there's so many fish. It's a little bit of a challenge to see where it is. Oh, there we go. It's actually a soragoi, which is a light grey, almost steel colour. Some people would say it's probably the most boring fish in this entire pond. It's all one colour, it doesn't have a pattern, and it's not red, black, white or yellow, but I quite like the one colour fish. They're just so minimal and simple, and yeah, really clean looking. In the other pond down there, I've got another one which is really nice orange colour. But yeah, I mean, some people would look at this pond and say, oh, the best fish is this Sankey, red, white and black. Other people, a tancho with the red circle on the head. But I think that's one of the good things about koi, is that you can take 1,000 fish and everyone will have a different favourite. I just really like the single colour ones. If I do a bad job, feel free to just tell me to stop. Oh, it went under. All right. Come here. I think it's probably wise that I let the professional do it. There's too many fish in this pond. They're quite different. You couldn't have 2 more contrasting fish in the bowl together. It was a tricky decision when I was here purchasing the fish, because I couldn't make up my mind which one I like most. They're both very different, and thankfully I went with both of them. Now this is where Chris keeps his big fish. In here are a selection of carp up to almost 1 metre long. And I can't quite believe I'm saying this, but 2 of the fish in here are actually mine and will be coming home with us today. The first is the Matsuba, which is a sort of vivid orange colour with a reticulation, like a black reticulation or like pine cone pattern going down its back. And then the other fish is the just massive in every way. It's a Karashigoi. I think it's about 83 centimetres in size. We'll be able to see that for certain once it's in the bowl. These 2 fish are going to be coming home with me today and I am so excited.
Manual labour. How many men does it take to build a cardboard box?
One intelligent one. Oh, you just tape it down. I thought you had to do what, you know? Alright, we can do this.
The trick is, put a little bit of water in to drop the corners into the bag.
The bags were tightly sealed with elastic bands and filled with oxygen to help the fish with their journey.
Probably the most precious load I've ever had to drive.
Oh yeah. Wait, no, you drive your girlfriend around, don't you? Edit that bit out.
Yeah. Oh, the ball patch.
Cover it. Don't worry. Not a lot to do about it now, is there?
To me, to you, to me, to you.
You gonna carry them down then?
Oh, I got the camera in my hand.
Oh, can't help out.
No.
I think actually these fish are so big and heavy, we're going to use machinery to get them back to the car.
Nice a lot. Wow. There you go.
Now, Cal, drive safely and quickly at the same time.
Oh no. Need for speed.
I'll let you go.
Thanks, Chris. See you later. Nice to meet you. Kitsukoi is the best shop ever. Quick, copyright.
I'm really happy that Cal has offered to drive, but at the same time, I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs, stressing out a little bit. I'll be calm once the fish are back home in the pond and looking happy. But until that time comes, I'm definitely a little bit nervous. We left the fish for 30 minutes or so for the water temperature in the bag to equalise with the pond. Like a kid at Christmas, apart from the present is wrapped in clear plastic so I can see what it is.
What did you get?
What did I get? I got a fish, mate. 4 of them. 53 centimetres. That was easy. I was waiting for it to go crazy and wriggle loads. If you give them a couple of little spins, they get a bit
Dizzy.
yeah, dizzy, and then they're less likely.
He says.
I've seen the pros do it. Right, let's try that again. Ooh. The smaller fish were in and looking quite content in their new home. Next up was the Kin Matsuba. This is probably one of my favourites, excluding Charlie of course. This fish's colour is just so vibrant. Omi says it reminds her of one of those neon orange highlighter pens.
Stretches, don't forget your stretches.
Eddie Hall home. I mean, I'm lifting a lot of water. That's not all fish, of course. That's huge. Oh, that's enormous. Wow, like, I don't really know what to say. The measurement goes to the top, to the end of the top fin, so it's like 81.
Oh, wow. Bye. Enjoy your new home. The pond is now actually a koi pond. And I'm really almost a bit emotional. This project started about 2 years ago when I started planning and saving up some money. And I guess you can say we did it.
Hey!
Look at them, they look amazing. They look incredible. That is a sight to behold. I've actually put the netting on because I don't want them jumping out in these first few days of them being in the pond.
Now, one part of this whole project which I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I have is the gardening. Planting the plants and putting them in place, I kind of gave that responsibility to my dad, as he is a garden designer and quite a qualified one at that. But it didn't quite look right. It all looked a bit sparse, and Dad obviously told me, be patient, Carl. With plants, you need patience, you need to water them, you need to look after them, just like the fish. And now, yeah, even just a couple of months later, it's looking really nice. I think in a year or two, the climbers will have covered, you know, a decent amount of the fence around the back. The filter house will be disguised nicely by the climbing plants that are going to cover it and turn it into just a big green wall. And yeah, I was never really bothered about gardening. I certainly didn't see the appeal of it. But these days, sometimes I'll just go out in the morning, feed my fish, and then do a bit of watering, bit of weeding, and kind of secretly enjoying it. Takes my mind off of work and fish for a short period of time and gives me a little bit of balance, which is healthy, I suppose. So, with everything completed and with the pond done, the fish looking happy, I decided to invite a few friends around and have a party. Now, to most people, that probably doesn't sound like a particularly unusual thing to do. However, in my life, I had never organised a party. I'd never organised a gathering as such. I'm quite an introverted person, and other than making these videos and connecting to the viewers, I don't do a lot of socialising. I kind of quite like having internet friends, because when you've had enough, you can just switch them off. Aside from this YouTube channel and aside from the viewers of these videos, I do have a few friends, and I decided to invite them round to celebrate the pond being finished.
To the fish.
We had a very pleasant evening out in the garden, and I was happy because my brother came round to help out with cooking pizzas.
We're gonna have lots of them. It's got a bit thin. That's good. That looks great.
A few days before, I'd actually made the dough myself. I've always just bought pizzas from the shop and just chucked them in the oven, but I thought I'd do it properly. I was making the effort to get friends to come round. I was gonna make dough for my homemade pizzas.
What are you doing?
Making the biggest mess ever. This is supposed to be a pizza base. I can't, it looks like my nightmares.
Turns out it's actually quite difficult. Well, I'm pretty sure I got the ingredients wrong because I didn't have scales. So what I ended up with was a big, stretchy, stringy, sticky mess. Thankfully, the pizza dough worked out okay in the end. But to be honest, my friends were definitely more interested in the fish than the food on offer. One thing we realised when my friends were around is that I hadn't actually given names to all my fish. This one's got a name. This is Charlie. That's the fish that I've had for longest, but all of these new ones, they didn't yet have names. My friend Tom said he wanted me to name one of them after him, so it made sense, given the fact that he's ginger, that I named the big orange one after him. So that's Peeping Tom, because it's kind of got funny eyes, and every now and then when I come out into the garden, it just floats up in front of the glass and stares at you. It's kind of creepy actually. But yeah, if you've got any good fish names for my other ones, then feel free to put them in the comments and I will read all of them when I get a moment. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you guys back on the channel soon.